Hi, I'm Arthur, and this is part 13 in a 20-part series I am doing covering fan-favorite successor chapters of Space Marines in order of the Legions. Do you need to have seen the other parts to understand this one? No, but it would make me happy. Alright, this one? Yeah, it's self-indulgent. The idea of the fan-favorite successor is kind of a twofold one. For one, it could be one of you lads, like one of your most requested whatevers that get thrown in the comments, because I do keep an eye out to see what you guys are actually interested in. And for the most part, I'll probably cover it at some point, as long as it's not just a chapter with a single paragraph of lore that can be summed up as, they exist. Or, secondly, they are a chapter that a lot of people outside of the channel like. So, with all that in mind, the Emperor's Spears are, neither of those, and I'm putting them there as they are probably my favorite chapter of Space Marines in the entire setting. The only reason why I say probably is because they haven't had much writing ever since their initial launch, so they had a few short stories and one big book written by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. So this is a send-off to me, my layup, my favorite chapter of Space Marines, though I will admit I had a dream about the Castellans of the Rift set to the Doom Eternal soundtrack, and that's been doing something to me lately. But regardless, I am going to be covering the Emperor's Spears, so let's give a breakdown of who they are, where they are, some fun lore snippets, as well as why I like them so much. Before we do, remember to like and comment what chapters you would like to see on this list, as I'm constantly rewriting the list to match demand. Use code BONEZONE at checkout for 10% off GamerSubs purchases, and let's fucking boogie! The Emperor's Spears are a fun, feral chapter of non-codex compliant Space Marines that descend from Guilliman's lineage. They are based on the feral world of Nemeton in Alara's Vale, and if you've been following this channel for any amount of time, you'd know that I never shut the fuck up about these guys. They were a part of a group of 3 chapters that formed the Adeptus Valari, a group of Space Marines dedicated to protecting Alara's Vale, a section of space that covers an incredibly wide swath in the Imperium Nihilus. These 3 chapters had a symbol that goes to hard as shit, which is the Manticore of the Vale, which is a manticore holding a spear, due to the 3 chapters comprising the Adeptus Valari being the Star Scorpions, the Celestial Lions, and the Emperor's Spears. Unfortunately, due to certain issues, the Scorpions and the Lions are no longer able to assist the Spears, and the Spears have been more or less left alone in the Vale for quite some time now. Though, honestly, it's not as bad as you'd think. It is pretty bad, but they have received a massive shipment from the Imperium. See, they lived in the Imperium Nihilus, like I said, meaning to get to them is incredibly difficult, but nonetheless, during the Indomitus Crusade, Guilliman launched many different ships from the Torchbearer fleet. The Torchbearer fleet is basically a seeding fleet filled with Primaris veterans who served in the Indomitus Crusade, as well as the technology and information in order to create new Primaris Marines. The goal was to basically reinforce chapters that needed it across the entirety of the Imperium's reach, which also meant the Imperium Nihilus. Unfortunately for the Spears, there were no veterans to give them any kind of support. It was only a ship that was filled with the information and technology in order to make the new Marines as well as the new gear, which was incredibly useful but required a lot of trial and error. It led to an entire generation of Space Marines dying on the table in the creation process simply because of how violent the rejection of the new gene seed organs were. After about 2 or 3 generations of Space Marines, the first Primaris Marine to technically succeed was created, and he's a very important character, but we are not discussing him now. Though, if you are curious about him, I do have an entire video discussing him. You should check it out. It's a video about my favorite character in the entirety of Warhammer, but I'm getting off track. With Primaris Marine success rates climbing, the Spears had and have a better chance at surviving the oncoming threats to Alara's Vale, which I think is cool. We never really truly found out how their story ended as a chapter. We just know that they're always in kind of a perpetual dire state. So that's kind of the who the chapter is. Now let's talk about the where. Their home planet of Nemeton and its orbiting forge moon of Bellona is the fucking fucking impossibly dense and powerful, with Bologna having one of the most dangerous defense systems in the setting. I'm not joking, they weaponized an entire asteroid debris field that gravitates around the moon and the planet of Nematon itself, strapping stationary guns as well as small gyro-corrective jet thrusters on each rock, so that there are well over 1 million different stationary guns orbiting Nematon at any given point that can correct their trajectory. If anything that doesn't necessarily need to be there needs to be gone in a quick shot. Because if a single enemy vessel shows up, about an infinite barrage of lasers and stationary guns would be fired their way from this asteroid field, which was why Nematon is one of the most defended planets in probably the entire setting. Meanwhile, Nematon is an almost endless shithole of storms and feral cannibal tribes that has a strong spiritual culture involving druidicism, and the tribal practices that, weirdly enough, extend into the culture of the chapter itself. See, the tribes do not look at the Emperor's spears as godly angels or demigods. They look at them as the spirits of lost children, or some kind of malevolent ghost come to steal from them. It's very, I guess, Celtish or Pictish in its kind of writing, though it's not nearly as dense in its inspiration as you'd expect. They see Space Marines as ghosts that come as a matter of course to steal away the young boys to turn them into soldiers for their weird magic demon war. The spears reflect this tradition as a matter of necessity as well as a matter of culture, as they have a unique rank in their chapter known as the Druidic Circle, known for having black armor instead of the blue while still maintaining the white helmet. The Druidic Circle comprises the chapter's apothecaries, chaplains, and librarians, though fun fact, every single one of them is trained to be an apothecary as well as being outfitted with an Arthesium gauntlet, meaning librarians and chaplains also have the gauntlet itself. This is a practical reaction as they often engage in war with individuals who seek to prevent the spears from gaining any ground, so the second an Emperor's spear drops before a chaplain or an apothecary shows up to gain the gene seed, they will despoil the corpse as quick as possible to prevent a new marine from being generated. But it's also a cultural practice, as it's to feed into the spiritualism of the planet itself, with it being almost a semi-religious role. Living on the planet is cruel, and the planet is often coated in storms and is 90% covered in thick seawater that is likely filled with predators, and with the remaining 5% that isn't covered in water maybe being habitable, and that's where the very tough people carve out an existence for themselves. It's honestly admirable. The cruel nature of where they are from causes the chapter to have developed a particularly interesting culture based around sardonic humor. And I say this without a hint of irony in the slightest. I'm not trying to say this to lead you astray, but these guys are so fucking funny, it's actually uncomfortable. Like, you're not used to, as a reader, thinking that Space Marines have a sense of humor that is actually, like, normal. But these guys laugh at the dumbest shit, and the graves of their fallen brothers are marked with a joke to cut the bitter cynicism that they live every day. Like in the book that we get most of this information from, The Spears of the Emperor, there is a scene where the main characters are walking through what is essentially a hall of memories to discover a bunch of plaques and grave memorial sites for individual Marines of note. And there is one that has a recovered helmet on it with a massive bolt shell hole directly in the forehead, and the inscription on that says, "Here lies Davith, who was told to advance with caution and keep his head down. He was a warrior to sail the stars with, but it must be said, when he died, the Arakani didn't lose a great thinker. Rest well, you stubborn bastard." That is just actually funny, and I think that's why I enjoy the Emperor's Spears. I've covered the who and the where, but not the why, which is why this is a good transition into why I think that's such a good thing. Why do I hold them in such a high regard, and why do I talk about them so much? It's because they represent to me my favorite part of 40K. I am probably in the minority here, as I speak with a lot of individuals in the community, like just other YouTubers that I'm friends with behind the scenes. And a lot of people love the grand sweeping scale of 40k, the badass battles and the edgy whatevers. But for me, I like 40k on the small scale, the humans. Not so much good character writing, but good character writing that can only exist in this particular setting. What do I mean? Well, a good character is one thing. Take someone like Dracula. Dracula was a fun character, but you can put him in almost any setting and it would kind of make sense. Dracula in modern day and Dracula 2000, Dracula in space there's probably a few of them. And then you even have films like Dracula versus Batman. They all make sense, but say you take a character like Nathaniel Garrow from the Horus Heresy, could he fit in any other setting? Not really. Not without completely rewriting a bunch of his story, but you could still take the core concept of what he is as a character and place them in the setting. The reason I like 40k is this image right here. This is Captain Titus, specifically from Space Marine 2. You probably recognize this character, as that game is amazing and a lot of people like it. This expression alone is one of the reasons why I love the setting of 40k, because he doesn't look happy. He doesn't look like the noble angel of death coming to save the little tiny guys on the planet. He looks resolved. He looks like he has grim resignation painted into his very soul. The service studs in his forehead showing that he has served for over 200 years. I love this image as it has the energy of a tool realizing he's a tool and he has no choice but to ride out what he's been doing until his own death. There are snippets of that throughout the entirety of the setting itself. There are other clips that I've seen before that kind of encapsulate this energy, but I think that that's kind of why I like the setting. These characters that are stuck doing the same thing because they have to. They are the best person for this job, but they just want to rest. Like that little trivia snippet that Gilliman secretly wishes he could just be some kind of low-end farmer in the middle of nowhere for the rest of his life. I like that because that's only really sad because it's Gilliman and you know the burden that he has to be placed upon. And I think the depressing murk that is the grim darkness of the 41st millennia gives you this certain perspective that you can't see in other settings. So I think exploiting that and using it for all it's worth is such a good idea. I think the badass parts of 40k is really cool, and there's a certain religious fervor that bubbles up in the pit of my heart whenever I see Black Templars doing goddamn near anything. But I find the depressing aspects, the moments that only make sense in the context of 40k, are the parts that draw me to it, which is why moments like this, where a Space Marine has a joke written on his tombstone, is just special because it just shows an understanding of the setting that it's not all just grim dark pee pee poo poo, but it's in context of the grim dark pee pee poo poo. There are people who can still make jokes about it because humor is relative to the people that it's around. It doesn't matter what generation or era you go to, there are going to be jokes being made about the people that are around them, the darkness that's around them. And I find that the Emperor's Spears embody these moments. It's why I love them so much. I think that they are such a unique and fun chapter that I think deserves more writing, but if it's not done by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, I genuinely don't want it. I think he encapsulates the interpersonal character writing of 40k in such a way that makes me love the setting, and the fact that he is not going to be writing for the Black Library forever is going to upset me to no end, but regardless of what happens, I am going to follow whatever writing he does afterwards till I goddamn die. With that being said, I want to say that this is probably the final time I mention the Spears of the Emperor. I adore them, but I have discussed more or less everything about them I possibly can throughout this channel. I bring them up a lot because they are my favorite. I like them. I like them probably more than the Night Lords, but very, very scantily close. I think they are one of the most relatable chapters, and I think if I was a Space Marine and I had to do the little "what flavor of ice cream are you" quiz, and it had every single Space Marine chapter, I would probably be an Emperor's Spear because I relate to them on such a weirdly somber level. And I think that's why I wanted to discuss them here, and that's why I superseded every single person asking for a different chapter of Space Marines for the Ultramarine successor. But yeah, that's the final nail in the coffin. I think I'm done bringing them up, because I think that we've basically discussed everything about them. With all that being said, what do you think about the spears? Do you agree with my small-scale appreciation of the setting, or do you like the big battles and the bolt-gun pew-pews? Let me know in the comments. Also, like, subscribe, same old jam as usual. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, as with your help, I'm able to support myself, my editors, and produce these videos for you. I'm going to be doing some changes to the channel in the coming weeks, as well as a proper celebration for the 100K. I've got a massive video in the works right now, and, yeah, sorry, we're probably gonna be at, like, 110,000 by the time this one comes out, but please be patient. I think it's going to be worth it because it's been a very requested video. Regardless, if you want to support me, as well as gain access to 2 additional videos per month if you become an Arthur Lord, then become a channel member today. Thanks once again for watching, and before I go, one last trivia bit to just throw a wrench into the discourse. The Emperor's spears actually don't use spears or power lances all that often. They just fight like traditional space marines. The name actually comes from the fact that they see themselves as the weapon of the Emperor to be wielded by him and only him. So if you see someone who converts a miniature of an Emperor spear marine with power lance, y'all can call them a fake fan. Why do you think that their chapter master is known as the Sword King? Because I'm going now before I get myself in trouble. God motherfucking damn.